All throughout the month of May, The Real is recognizing AAPI Heritage Month, a celebration of Asians and Pacific Islanders in the United States. We're going to be educating and informing our viewers on ways to support the AAPI's community impact in America, as well as offering ways to combat hate and discrimination. And joining us today is an incredible actor and activist you know from hit shows like Lost and Hawaii Five-0, who can now be seen in the Netflix film Stowaway. Give it up for my good friend, Daniel Dae Kim.
Hey, everybody. So good to see you all.
That's Daniel. Yeah, it's great to see you too. Okay, Daniel, so happy AAPI Heritage Month. Tell me, why is it important to you to recognize this month, especially right now?
Well, first of all, happy AAPI Heritage Month to all of you. Jeannie, it's always great to see you. With everything that has been going on in the Asian community these days and this past year, I think it's okay that we take this month to celebrate all the reasons why we're proud to be American and all the ways that we contribute back to this incredible country. And it reminds me actually of a story. Just last week, I went to Niagara Falls. I'm shooting something here in Toronto, Canada. And I went on my own. The city's all locked down, but the falls are still open. So I was there, and it reminded me of a family trip I took when I was 8 years old with my parents and my grandmother. And we were all recent immigrants, and the feeling of being so proud to be in America and to be able to be counted among these people where we can say Niagara Falls is part of our home country. I don't remember that much about that experience except about getting wet from all the mist, but I will say pride was really a big part of it. And I don't think that there's anything wrong in a month like this to maybe ask our country to be a little bit proud of us too.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the biggest issues facing the AAPI community is what's called the model minority myth. And in order to really define what that is, I had to call John Yang, who happens to be the president and executive director of Asian Americans Advancing Justice. And here's exactly what he said. The model minority myth was created to divide communities of color. It's harmful because it suggests that Asians are the good minority and other communities of color are not doing as great due to some fault of their own. By doing so, it immediately creates a wedge or divide between communities of color. It also seeks to mask the racism that underlies this myth. This was the white people's way of explaining that racism can't exist because look at the Asians and look how well they're doing. And this is something that not only is it hurtful because it pits minorities against each other, but when you focus and praise so much of one minority group, you actually completely remove their struggles and you ignore the fact that they've also had setbacks, which is not true. So this is something that I'm really glad that we're talking about here, and I'm happy to just break this down here today.
And the thing is called divide and conquer. And you know what, Daniel? We're so happy to have you here. We need to celebrate all cultures. So we all need months. So this is the month, and we're going to do it. Now, my question to you is, do you think the model minority myth has played a role in the recent rise of hate crimes against members of the AAPI community?
Thank you for the question. It's hard for me to get into the mind of people who would attack someone just based on what they look like. So I can't really speak for them, but I can say that Asian Americans, this model minority myth is all part of misperception in general. And this idea that somehow the model minority myth means that those of us who are the most successful represent all of us. And that could not be further from the truth. In fact, half of Asian Americans have a poverty rate that's higher than the national average. In New York, that's almost 30%. And if you count our Asian American elderly who are being attacked, that rate is almost at 30% too, which is far above the national average of 15%. So those people are the ones who are being ignored and becoming invisible because they see those of us who are successful as representing all of us. In fact, there was a school district in Washington that decided to make Asian Americans not people classified as people of color because they were doing too well at their school. And that is an incredibly insidious argument because the implication is that one, those who are successful represent all of us, and also people of color if white equals success, then what does people of color mean? What does that mean? And these are the kind of subtle ways that we have to battle perception and misperception here.
Jeannie and Daniel, I'm curious if there were ever times in your life where you felt like you played into the model minority myth or felt pressure to.
Sure. I mean, Jeannie, do you want to answer the question first?
Well, for me, the most immediate thing that I can think of is growing up. For some reason, my parents were very afraid to disrupt the peace. And that even meant calling for help if we need it. Like, I remember our house got robbed a couple times, and my parents said, do not call Kansak. Kansak means police in Vietnamese, and they were like, no, don't cause trouble. It was always a big thing. Don't call the police. And we always looked at it as like the white man. Because if they came, even though we were all documented, even my immigrant family that came over, we sponsored them, they were all afraid of just being sent back or having something happen where we would get in trouble. And so because of that, whether I was bullied in school or we needed, financial aid, or even, if I needed to get some help from police because of our house getting robbed, we never reach out to authority. And I realize now that that was part of the model minority myth. The model minority doesn't make a peep. They stay quiet. They don't cause disruption. They don't cause crime. They don't, bother the police. It was almost like an exchange. We call you the model minority, so you don't bother us. And that was us being complicit. And I feel, I learned that now. I woke up to that today.
Daniel, what about you?
For me, I came over, as part of legislation called the Immigration and Naturalization Act of 1965. And this act allowed people from Asia to come over if they had degrees of higher learning or were skilled at a specific trade, i.e. medicine and engineering. So after 1965, there was a huge flood of Asian doctors, Asian engineers who were coming to America. My dad and my mom were two of those people. My dad is a doctor by trade. And so part of what happened is that the generation who was born here in America at that time or came over when we were very young, like me, grew up to be the model minority in the 80s because I did well in school. I got good grades. I participated in all the activities, and I didn't make a peep, like Jeannie said. I went along to get along. But part of that is that everyone started to perceive that all Asians were like me. And that's where all the perceptions of, oh, they're good at math, they're not good at sports, all these things, which was not true in my case. But, it's this idea that the model minority shaped everything about how I grew up, because there were a lot of assumptions made about me and people who look like me based on a small group of us.
It's just so funny how stereotypes affect us all, Daniel. I mean, for a lot of Black people, all you see on TV are just criminals, then you think all of us are criminals. This is just mind-blowing. Daniel, are there specific microaggression members of the AAPI have to deal with because of the model minority myth?
I think, a lot of that has to do with things that Jeannie and I were talking about, these assumptions that A, we're good at math and science, or B, we have some connection to our home country, that we all speak the language of our ancestry, when we wouldn't ask that of Europeans. And, I think your point about stereotypes is such a good one, because, Asians represent 60% of the world's population. We are over 50 countries, and we speak over 100 different languages. How can you make generalizations about that number of people, and think that all of us are exactly the same? So, all people of color suffer from stereotypes, and it's a fallacy for any of us to think that all of humanity of one color is all alike.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a really good point. Jeannie, I'm wondering what people can do to help change the thought process behind the model minority myth.
Absolutely. Well, the first thing is to stop making stereotypes on Asian Americans or Asians in general. Even asking questions like, where are you from? And if they tell you they're from Baltimore or America, you're like, no, really, where are you from? There are Asian Americans, and there are, we are American once we are here. And so it's not to just think that Asians are just kind of these foreigners. Also, just to remember that there are many Asian people that are profiled, as Daniel had brought out, in so many different stereotypical ways that are hurtful to us. I remember when I was posting about the Atlanta shooting, a lot of comments were saying such hateful things like, but you guys are rich, so why don't you just pay for the lawsuit in order to sue the city? Or you guys don't like black people anyway, so now you know what it feels like. There's so many stereotypes, and I think that the first thing we have to do is to understand that we are all uneducated when it comes to minority groups out there. In our educational school system, they don't teach enough about Black history, they don't teach enough about Asian history, they don't teach enough about Latin history. So it is our due diligence to learn. It is our due diligence to learn and to understand that all minorities have had their struggle and their racism that they are still breaking through today. So as soon as we understand that and we band together, we stop making white just a superiority.
Well, it's great conversations like this that we had, and we thank you, Daniel, for taking time out to be with us. We appreciate you, and love you and Jeannie, okay?
Yes,
She
thank
talks
you
about
so
you
much,
all the
Daniel, for
time,
being here.
all the time.
Yes, we love you so much. Make sure to watch Daniel in the Netflix film Stowaway. It's streaming right now, so check it out.